So maybe just while we're waiting, I could summarize the sheet because there's nothing really new to say about it. Is what I did was because everybody, there are some hard graders and some not so hard graders, is I normalized all the scores by
I
their
know.
averages.
Yeah, I saw that stuff.
So I just calculated the averages, normalized everybody's scores, and then took the average of all of our scores.
Dean,
So the
do you
number.
want to share your screen, or you want me to share my screen with your,
Let's see. Let me
you
go
know?
ahead and I, I
I apologize for I took my notes on paper and I only just threw my scores in there about a half hour ago. So if
No,
I'm
okay.
not averaged in, sorry about that.
Well, that's okay because yours would have been more challenging without having Chris Schomburg anyway. And
Yeah,
unless it dramatically shifts the balance with four of us in there, it's likely not to have a huge impact.
I don't think it will. I think we're probably all going to be pretty close to on the same page with this.
Oh, I can't share my screen, Paulo.
I know. Oh, you're right. I'm the. I thought you were the host, but no, I actually.
You are
Yeah,
the
there you go,
host.
Tim. Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Okay, so that's again my summary is best I could do of them. You could see it's pretty close between Chris Anderson and Pierce. And if you were to look at the green squares that I highlighted in my version, it's who was the person who stood out. And we're all looking for different things, so there's no reason to be concerned about whether or not you got the quote unquote average answer in this at all. Um, so, for instance, Greg was looking for strong leadership skills,
Yeah.
and so his score for Pierce was higher. Pierce was very well spoken, looked like he was very much in control, and so he scored higher in Greg's case. JC, I suspect as a student, you look for that connection with students. Chris was very infectious from a personality point of view, very excited. So I could also see how that score would make some sense. So what we're kind of doing is weighting all of our thoughts on all of this. So Joe, maybe without pulling up your scores, because I'll have to switch screens again, how did you rank the three? Or well, the two, because you recused yourself from Chris Schomburg.
Um, well, you know, ju- okay, I won't make any comments about Chris. I think that's probably just the most fair thing, at least until we are finished here. So, um, Chris Anderson was my top pick. I think Pierce is an incredibly strong candidate. And as Paulo said yesterday, I think we're just very fortunate that all three of them have potential, but Chris Anderson's my top pick.
Okay, so it doesn't change our ranking at all. So that I think is good to note. That looking across it, Leslie had a tie numerically to two sig figs. So at least half of us um, believe that Chris Anderson's a top pick. So I think probably the thing to do would be to just share our thoughts on what we thought about the pool of candidates, and then we can maybe delve a little bit deeper into what the next steps are. I talked to HR today. Mine's is officially closed at this point, but HR was still on their phone, just like the rest of us. Um, Being officially released doesn't mean that you don't have work to do. Okay, so JC, do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about your thoughts on the three candidates?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, I did really like Chris Schomburg because I know that he was very energetic and it was probably a little overwhelming at times with his interview. You could hear how passionate he was. And so I did really like that about him though, that he was very passionate and you could tell that that he would really give his all in this position. Even if he doesn't know certain things, I still think he would try really hard. He wasn't dressed the most professionally, but again, I still really liked him. And then Chris Anderson would be my second choice, just because I do really like that he had two different experiences with IAC programs, and I feel like that he is somebody that I feel like could give really valuable information to not just me but the rest of the students, and could give different perspectives on things. And he seemed very knowledgeable and has a lot of really good information. And I don't think he has that much experience with teaching, but he was talking about his mentorship and how he has mentored people, and so I do think that he has the capability to do that. He doesn't strike me as being somebody who has strong leadership either, but I still think that like he would be really good in this role. And then for Pierce, I liked Pierce. I just didn't know like he has like really strong like management kind of skills and stuff like that, and I just don't know how that would translate or like how he would interact with students. So that's why kind of like I had him not as high as everybody else, just because I didn't really get a feel for like how he would work with students, although he did say that like he's trained people and stuff like that. I was just leaning more towards the Chris's, I guess.
Okay, sounds great. Greg, we're just kind of going through and talking about our thoughts.
Yeah.
And we've got a ranking as
Sorry,
an
I was
average.
Yeah, sorry I was late. I promised my lab the members who were working today I'd buy them lunch, and things got delayed. So
No problem. Do you want to just give a brief summary? So your comments are up on screen as well as your normalized scores.
yeah. So I was I preferred, so sorry, JC. Um, I preferred Chris Anderson or Pierce, and it's kind of a toss up to me. I see advantages in both of them. I was not comfortable with Chris Schaumburg, and not because in some ways he was the most likable, at least in the interview process. I wouldn't want to judge likability based on an hour interview, but at least in terms of his warmth. But my problem with Chris, his answers were long-winded and often not very direct at what we were trying to get at. And I felt like if that's his communication style under the pressure of an interview, I felt like it would be not the most efficient leader. And some of his answers were kind of sloppy too, and technically. And so I really wondered if he had the depth of understanding, certainly that Chris Anderson had. So when we go to the other two, Chris versus Pierce, for me, I think JC did hit on something that I detected. Mind you, I wasn't in person for Pierce's interview. Pierce seemed to be had a very strong sense of management, which has its positives and its negatives, right? In an academic setting, too heavy of a hand can be a hard. That's often not the best way to get students excited about their work. So I wondered how well he would adjust to an academic environment where you have to be as much a coach as a manager. Chris, but I thought Pierce was a better communicator than Chris Anderson in terms of being able to articulate his ideas and his accomplishments in a way that was clear, and that has its advantages for being able to say, here's what we need to do. He can lay it out very clearly and people can follow it. But maybe that's not what we need for this position. I thought, and I think JC as well, that Chris Anderson probably from a technical perspective was the strongest, and clearly would hit the ground running from understanding what needs to be done in this position. And if that's important to us to get going quickly, then I might bump my score for him up a little bit higher. I mean, I know it's important that we get started quickly, but how quickly is quickly? So, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So that's my general perception.
just kind of a comment on the how quickly. Our deliverables for the no-go is actually relatively soft the first year. And
Okay.
it's a full academic year. So I think we don't have to be completely solid until December of next year, which helps.
Yeah, that does help a lot. But I would be happy at least. I mean, at least the Chris Anderson and Pierce, I could be persuaded either way. Chris Schaumburg would take a heavy lift to get me to move him to the top of my list.
Okay. Let's see. So I think Leslie's are the next comments, and she's not here, but I think they speak for themselves. So we probably don't need to go with that. She had the last two candidates, Chris Anderson and Pierce Stark, tied in her numerical score. Paula, you're next.
Yeah, so the thing that I will add, from what has been said is that, I told him, I feel like with Chris Anderson, I can just give him the keys of the boss, and he'll take care of everything on that part, right? Um, and and he knows what it is, so we are not risking somebody bringing that he may not like the job because he's done it as a student on that part, and actually at KNL, it's basically doing something very similar. So we know, I mean, I'm pretty sure that he's going to like the job on that part, right? I'm not concerned about that. Pierce also struck me, as it was a good surprise. I was not expecting that. I mean, I told that, Tim, he even lectures at the end about corporate, things and so on, right? My concern with Pierce is that, it's two things. It's going to take some training to do because I don't think he's really into, he's not a hands-on, guy about instrumenting and things like that. And I don't know if he's going to like the job or not. We might have the risk like he might found here, and he doesn't like being, on the field frequently and working in an office with the students who are not trained, right, on that part, and teaching at the same time and so on. So I see a little bit more of a risk. Let's start, more training in the beginning, and let's start on that part. That's it, So I would say, my first is Chris Anderson. Second one is Pierce on that part, and the third one is, it's a little bit lower, the other Chris on that part. So yeah.
Okay.
That's a really good point, Paulo, about how comfortable would Pierce be with getting into the weeds of, this instrument's not working, right?
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Okay. So I'll sum up, although I think nothing I have is new from what's been said already. I think that Chris Schomburg could be a wonderful addition either at Mines or Red Rocks in terms of teaching courses tied in with renewables. He looks really, really passionate about that. I think after the interview, my first comment was that if he told me he was 25, it would not have blown me away at all. He was a very youthful guy, and I think to some degree, I'm looking for a manager that would maybe present themselves a little bit more professionally than that. So I do like Chris Schomburg, but maybe not for this position. I think if it came down to we did not meet the needs of the other two, that Chris is a trainable person, but it'd be a fair amount of training. Chris Anderson would immediately make my life about 10 times easier if he accepts, just because he'll actually be teaching me things about the IC. I like his mention of the fact that the two systems were different. And rather than making a strong statement about this is the way I would do it, really asking our opinions about it. Because I don't think there's a clear answer. I think different ways will function better depending on the group of students involved. So I thought that was good. I was a little bit concerned about teaching. He had the teaching training question that he tried to address, and he seemed to really waffle on that. I feel a little bit better about it now after Joe had mentioned the possibility of teaching at Red Rocks and the email that I just had replied to in Chris Anderson. And Greg, you may not have seen that since I just replied about 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
So both Chris Anderson and Chris Schomburg replied back to my messages from yesterday, thanking them for coming. I don't hold it against Pierce. Again, it's the day before Thanksgiving, so who knows whether anybody's looking at their emails. But in Chris Anderson's reply, he seemed genuinely interested in finding out if he could make it work. And one of the ones ties in with teaching courses at Red Rock. So I think I see his style as being something that probably would fit into teaching. So I'm not too concerned about it, although that was my one sort of concern on him. Much like Paulo said, I was really impressed by Pierce. He, as an aside, was a last add-on for the people that we were going to interview with. So the two Chris's were our top two choices initially based on the resumes. But we hadn't heard from Chris Anderson, so we added Pierce. But he did very, very well. But again, whether or not this is a job that he's looking for, I think we're going to find this with students too, is that we just went through the student list. So 4 of those students that are heading for grad school may not necessarily like this job. And in the same way, when I look at Pierce, it's possible that the position he's looking for is not training students and writing reports. Because he looks really, really strong in the business areas. But I'm not sure he wants to do this. As an aside for the rest of you, because I've shared this with a few, from what I could tell looking at our recruitment system, he might have applied for a second position at Mines because he's got a longer list of references that reference two job titles. So
Interesting.
I think he's very, very interested in being at Mines, as he said in his interview. But whether he's particularly interested in this job, it's not as clear.
Team, may I add two things there that I remember? I would say if I was vice president, I would hire Chris Homer as a teaching faculty for different classes on that part, and I'll hire peers as what is it called when we hire senior people? Like Greg, 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 help me out here. That's like when you hire, what is it called?
I don't know what you mean. So you mean Greg that works with
in a manufacturing place, what is it called?
Research faculty?
No, he's not research faculty. He's like
he a professor of practice.
Yeah. So I will actually hire as professor of practice, to peers on that part.
Yeah, he doesn't quite have the resume that you would usually do for a professor. Usually those people still have advanced degrees.
That's a good point on that part. You're right. But the second point I want to say is Chris Anderson. I contact him because my former boss from the IAC, he gave me 4 names about these are good kids that work with me, and I will vouch for them on that part. So that's how he applied, and I he told me he could be a good person. I contacted to LinkedIn, and when I asked him about this, the only question he had me is this a permanent job or not? And I said, it's a 5-year contract, and he said, that's good enough for me on that part. Well, he also said he enjoyed his time at IIC and so on. So I think he really enjoyed that part. So to me, out of these 3, the one who is really applying to the IIC job is Chris. The other 2 would like to work at Mines, on that part, and I think they will be good people to have in our institution on that part, right? So yeah.
So
I think Paolo has persuaded me to change my vote.
I think you did too. I think you make a really good point. I think he's just the best fit. I think Chris Anderson is just the best fit for this position, and I think he'd do a really good job in it.
okay, now having said
I
that,
can just,
go ahead,
I
Joe.
have one thing to add on that exact same topic. This is a point that came up both in our trainings at with the people from Rutgers, and then also in my training for the certified energy manager from the AEE people who are very experienced energy engineers and auditors. So there's there's an expertise that's going to require a lot of nuance here. And what it is that we are criticizing the plant manager with these audits. And some of them, to a greater or lesser degree, are going to respond defensively to that. Mike at Rutgers told us, make sure you send this report straight to the CEO, because you don't want the plant manager actually quashing this before it gets up above him, because he's or she's considering this a criticism. On the other hand, in order to get implementation, you have to have buy-in from from the plant manager on down to the maintenance people. And so there's a lot of nuance that has to go into the communication on that day when we're asking questions where you're both respectful and you present yourself as someone that has something to contribute to their processes. And there's just going to be a lot of nuance that goes into those different forms of communication. And so I think Chris Anderson just is the one that's going to get up and running and be able to handle that and teach us, really. I mean, it's going to be a confidence game in the first year as well. We're walking into a situation where we have a steep learning curve, and so just in the first year, I think Chris Anderson's experience is going to be extremely valuable. So
So we do. I agree with what you said, but Paulo does have some experience in this as when he was at CSU. So you are still right. I think your point is very well taken. But Paulo also has some of that experience of the nuanced kind of approach to the reviews process.
It's kind of an aside on that. We've never really talked about this in any detail, but I've sort of assumed what I think everybody will do. So my assumption is that Greg, Leslie, Liz, and Amy will never go on a visit. And
Mm, I might go on a few.
you might go on a few. Oh, that'd be great.
All right, that's great.
I'll consider
No,
those to
yeah.
be bonuses. I think Joe is going to go on many of the commercial building ones, um, and some of the manufacturing ones. Paolo's probably going to be able to do about a half of the commercial ones and a few manufacturing ones. And then I'm committed to doing. I've got a contractor requirement as a director, but I would see myself doing about half of the manufacturing and then a few of the commercial buildings. The one common person in this would be whoever we hire. And so I think having that person be able to be persuasive would be important because not any given time will necessarily Paulo be at all the visits. So even though he has experience, I don't.
And I was thinking about the teaching aspect. I think JC was the one that maybe brought up first, but I think others commented on as well. I I I I think that the best teaching here will be by, as Joe just mentioned, will be by experience rather than by lecturing, right? And I think it's really easy for us to think that oh, they need to be a good lecturer, and that probably isn't the case, at least not. Um, and that's something you can learn. I was not a good lecturer when I started in academia 25 years ago. I don't know. Maybe I'm not still not a good lecturer. I don't know. JC can be the one to comment on that.
No, no, you are. You're a good lecturer.
We don't need this person to be a good lecturer. We need him to be a good hands-on teacher. Yeah.
Yep, no, I agree.
And
Um, so let's see. So the next step moving forward, I talked to HR about what happens next. In a standard academic hire, we would invite people out for visits so that we can impress them and also for them to see a little bit more and we'd learn a bit more about them. In Pierce's case, if we're hiring him, I'd really be inclined to do that. If we've decided that Chris Anderson's a person, we can bypass that step and go directly to an offer. And that would give us the fastest result. The next thing we would do is make a proposal for what the salary would be. Go ahead.
but I would encourage you in because when you do that kind of a thing, you still offer to him the opportunity for a site visit
Yep.
before he makes a decision
No, I agree.
out of courtesy. So even if we don't even and if he's if it's not important to him, and one of the things and this gets to a question you asked me yesterday, Tim, but I'm not sure I would give him the offer before you offer him like how do I say this? You can say, we're very interested in you. You're our top candidates. We're willing to have you come do a site visit. Otherwise, then what I would do is say, if that's not critical for you, we'd like to have one more round of interview. That way it opens up for you. You've offered him the site visit without actually giving away that he's going to get the job. And I'm serious.
Sure.
Because what could happen, he comes here on a site visit and he says, I don't want to come here. That would be the worst, right? So then we paid for travel for him to come here.
Right.
So you're trying to sort of protect yourself from that scenario.
No, that makes sense. So Greg is the only one who, other than Joe, is a department head. I would concede whatever knowledge you have is probably very useful. So no, I think that's a good approach. We can't formally offer him a salary anyway, because that has to go through HR. So
But
maybe that is the
you
next
can
step.
tell him he's our top candidate. I
Right.
think you're allowed to say that. That you're our top candidate.
So yeah, so we could certainly do that. That would make some sense. I mean, to some degree, because his wife is expecting in 4 or 5 days. The main thing I want to avoid is pulling this out too long, because I think if you were able to arrive here in mid-January, that would be about the latest that I'd really want to have somebody come on board. Because we are in the process of hiring students, and those students have to be able to interact with the person who's there day to day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So no, I think that's a good approach. Is that so? If we agree on this, and so I'm going to go ahead and after we meet, I'm recording this. Is let the other two participants or three participants also have any input on it. But then post Thanksgiving, I can make that call to Chris Anderson and do just what you proposed, Greg. Is let him know that he's our top candidate. He has an option of doing a visit or another interview. If you had any other questions, I suspect he won't have any more questions.
You just call it a site interview.
Okay. At the same time, I'll probably start the processing with HR. This was again another question I asked Greg about earlier, and Paul and I have talked about it as well. Is the salary range on the website is 68,000 to 89,000 or 79,000 roughly. And so we would go someplace in the middle. And again, this is the first person I've hired that wasn't a student or a postdoc. So that seems like a reasonable thing. We could get HR started on that because it has to be vetted by a bunch of administrative departments to approve our offer.
Mm-hmm.
So then we would be ready if we needed to make an offer. Because at the point that's been approved, then I can formally contact Chris and make an offer. And then negotiations start at that point, I suspect. So Greg, tell me what I'm missing. I'm sure I'm missing something.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, he may want to, because this is I would let HR manage the HR stuff, like, the housing and stuff. That's, he's got a family. He's going to want to understand. I don't know if he's going to have a two-body problem. If his wife is probably right now, she'll be taking some time off. But I would, we should first, we shouldn't try to wrestle with that right now.
Right.
But if he brings it up to us, then we wrestle with it. Otherwise, let's keep it simple like you just suggested, and see where his pain points pop up that we have to respond. And then I will say this to you: if he brings up pain points, do not rely on HR to be their objectives and your objectives are two different things. Their objectives are to keep us in the rules, whatever that means.
Right.
Even if the rules aren't clear to us, right? Our objective is to get them to come here, right? So, and sometimes it's not that we want to break the rules. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they will not necessarily act in the best interest of our goal. That's what I'm saying. They've done that many times.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, the one he's brought up already that I replied back to the email was the question about relocation expenses.
Yeah.
So my understanding from talking to HR is that because it's going through AA, it becomes the department's responsibility. And if it's not the department, then it goes back to the research grant. Is that sort of your read on it also as department head, Greg?
Yes, but I'm not sure that we'll be allowed to use DOE funds for research, for moving. We would have to use overhead. What we would probably do is have to go to ORA and ask if we could get back some overhead to pay for his moving expenses.
Now, when you say get back overhead, since we don't actually formally have our contract fully in place yet and haven't spent very much money,
they can give us a pre-award.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, we could look at other things, but I hadn't actually thought about that. It certainly isn't in our budget, and so where exactly we would come up with it.
It's never in any budget,
Yeah.
but it always comes up.
I mean, my guess is my department is probably not that willing to secede any money at this point. So it's probably coming from us someplace.
We need to talk. I think that we go straight to academic affairs for this, bypass departments or the deans at least.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what level of do we want to go to?
Probably John Berger is the right initial person.
Okay, so I can ask him about relocation.
And you could propose to him that we would, if we could get back some of our overhead money generated to cover the moving expenses, that would be fine by us.
Okay.
even if it ate into the fraction we got back, although we would like to get, we want some slush money that we can, in case this, yeah, we just want, our budget is not full of unexpected costs.
Sure. No, again, I've looked at some things and we're definitely over on some. So because the 75 will be 5,000 above what we budgeted.
Yeah.
So it'll be about 10,000 over per year that we have to accommodate somehow. I think the goal ultimately would be to look for additional funding in the 5-year period, but it doesn't help us in year one.
How much faculty hours do we have on this? I mean, I know that Joe, it's you and Joe.
So we have, looking at it,
Just don't give me hours, just approximate numbers. How many faculty,
so in
I
year
don't even know if I have.
in year one, we actually have $21,000 tied up with faculty.
Because if there's any money that goes to me, I'm probably willing to give that back to the program. So.
Okay, so you have almost $2,000 allocated to you.
That's not much.
Nope. I mean, unfortunately, this program doesn't support anybody very well.
No.
But it's great for our students, though.
Except for the students.
Yeah.
Yeah. As much as we can say, and no comment, JC, but as much as we can say we support them well at all. So.
No, I mean, ultimately, all of this, I think, is intended to build up a strong program eventually, and that will get better funding as time goes by. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so there is in year one about 21,000 allocated for all of us that are not students or managers on our side. Red Rock side is separate because there's a subcontract. So yeah, so we've got a little bit of flexibility. So I think there are ways we could flesh it out. There are some other things we're short on, like travel budget. So there'll be some juggling over the first few years, but I think it'll be okay. So I'm okay, no problem at all with 75. I think he's looking possibly to think about Joe's offer. So Joe had mentioned yesterday, I can't remember which conversation, that if he wanted to do an adjunct teaching position, he can earn about an extra $9,000 at Red Rocks for one night a week. So I think there are some options available, and I'm still pushing to see whether or not we can get any support from academic affairs if we were to teach a course that's specifically on the techniques we'd be using, but for all students as opposed to just our students. And we'll see. Not a lot of movement in that direction yet, but I think this is the time of the year where everybody's stressing about their adjunct budgets. So, so I think we're all right. So anyway, so the next step, it sounds like, would be I'll communicate this video to everybody else and let them know. I think Chris Anderson is our top candidate. We'll make an invitation to him to do a site visit. Sort of hoping he doesn't, because Greg, we also don't have the funds for that. And that one probably is a little bit more challenging, I suspect, to get.
Hey, so Tim and Greg, so is the idea is to just give him the offer? Is it more like a courtesy, so come here and check it out? Or is it more like, okay, we still have some questions for you on that part?
We treat it as a get to know you event. Make sure it says, when you say that you're our top candidate, right, what you're saying is, if you like us and we already like you, we want you to like us.
I see.
What's worse is what you proposed could happen with peers, right? And I don't think it's fair for us to presume that our 1 hour interview was enough for us to know that he likes us, right?
That's true.
He's at PNNL. It's kind of cushy at National Labs. If you get in the right spot, you know better than me. And PNL probably even more so than INRO. And so, we got to make sure it's as much about us selling the job to him, right? As well as.
I was going to say, that's certainly my impression when we do faculty hires, is that there's a little bit of sorting, but largely we're trying to impress people about why they should come to Mines.
Mm-hmm. 5 years is a long time. It's not. In what he said to you, Paulo, when he said that's long enough, I mean, he probably figures in 5 years he's created his own value statement for Mines or INRAL or wherever he wants to land, right? So, I'm sure he's thinking about this more than just he's clearly thinking about it, right?
Yeah, no, I agree.
What was kind of interesting about it was that, and again, going back to the hands-on element, is that one of the things he mentioned in the email that I answered was he's interested in getting an electrician apprenticeship.
Interesting.
That was a very a surprise to me on that part, which I think is great.
No,
On
it
that
is.
part, but I was,
For us, it is, because it probably means he's not planning on becoming a researcher at NREL. And we never actually pushed that angle. Greg, when you mentioned it, I just realized that in trying to sell us, one of the things we didn't say in our interview was that we're highly connected with NREL,
Mm-hmm.
which would be a positive if he's thinking about being there eventually, but he may not be based on his electrician interest.
Huh.
So it may fit in very well with what we have in mind. But yeah, so I think it's clear what we're going to do for the next step. I think that's really all we had to cover today. So I think that with this group's permission, if the feedback I get from the other PIs on the project is nothing negative, is that after Thanksgiving, I'll talk to HR, get the offer going in paper just to get approvals for the rate that we talked about, which was 75,000. Greg had mentioned 74 as a wise department head, and Paul and I talked a little bit about that also. So
We don't need to throw in superlative adjectives like wise.
yep. Anyway, I think so that'll happen after Thanksgiving, and again, I'll contact Chris if that's the case also after Thanksgiving,
Mm-hmm.
and offer him the opportunity to visit us. I'll also let the other people know, probably not that long after, if Chris is interested, that we're still looking at it, that everybody's in consideration still, because it could easily be that we move down the list.
Mm-hmm. It would ask. I would encourage him to try to come here while the students are still here. Now, I don't want him to come interview on December 21st, right?
Right.
Or come visit on December 21st. It won't give him the same vibe. So we would prefer him to come in, and plus, yeah, it's just, that's the right answer. So
Right. So, and again, going back to your role as department head, so this is still on our dime also. If we invite him, then we cover his costs for coming
we'll
out.
find a way to cover it.
Okay. That sounds good.
Might
Also,
talk to Rob Braun about slipping us some money from AES or something.
Our electrician training facilities are fairly impressive here, and I don't have any travel plans, so I'm available at any point to give them a tour over at Red Rocks as well.
that's a great idea, Joe, on that part. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that'll work out really well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing I want to impress on him is that not only are we really committed to working with Red Rocks, but they're just next door,
Exactly.
and NREL even more so. So that should be a strong selling point for us.
So hey, Greg. So on that comment, it's tricky for him to travel right now because, as Tim said, his wife is about to have a baby on that part, right? So how do you want to manage that part? I mean, I don't think he's going to travel before the baby's born, all right? And that could be
Well, hopefully his wife is. Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to play it by ear.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing about him starting early, right? I mean, you want to move when you have a 1 month old? I don't think so, right? But one option is we have him work remotely for the first month or two, and then have him arrive. Because yeah, if he's got a 1 month old, I would.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a tough
travel.
move. Yeah.
Or have him,
I mean,
yeah.
my guess is that he would move in advance of his wife and family.
I think so too. Yeah.
Because yeah, it would be very difficult. So it means, and we don't know his situation, whether or not that'll be fine. We don't know how old his oldest child is. So that may be very challenging, or maybe not so much. Hard to tell. But certainly I think that our team is adaptive enough. We've got enough people on it that probably had these experiences that we could help a fair amount. So thanks for the mention about not letting HR deal with it. We can handle it.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
Sounds good.
fantastic.
All right.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving, folks.